Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. It's Influencer Friday, and on the show with me today, I've got Kendall in Kentucky. Kendall Bailey's a wife, mom, conservative activist, and influential media personality who has exploded in popularity across social media networks. One big reason for that, in 2014, Kendall was diagnosed with progressive deafness and cancer. The night before her scheduled full thyroidectomy, she discovered she was pregnant with her second child. We're going to hear from Kendall how she fought cancer while pregnant, faced nearly impossible decisions, and persevered through it all with courageous faith. This course laid the groundwork for her to be naturally a pro-life advocate. In the last few years, she's begun to also speak out for parental choice and organizing peaceful protests, documenting it all on her social media, and becoming a contributor for Newsmax, Fox, and OANN. Kendall, thank you so much for being on Politically Basic with me today.
Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Well, listen, your story is wild to say the least. And I'm sorry that all happened to you, but glad that it did too, because you're a great advocate in these issue areas. So if you don't mind, just start us off and tell us more about what happened to you that has given you such a remarkable testimony now.
Absolutely. I wouldn't change any of it either. I would never wish this story upon anyone, but God has truly made beauty from ashes, and it's been incredible to experience. And I was actually just sharing on my social media recently how, we're told that we are to choose joy when we experience trials of many kinds because it develops our perseverance. And I think in this specific story, I was able to just go on a journey with Christ and get closer with him. And it was beautiful. It was about, my husband and I were relatively newly married, and we had a 2-year-old son, and we were out at dinner. And the waitress came over to me and said, "Can I get you any bread?" And I said, "No, I think we're okay, but can you bring me more bread?" And it was at that moment my husband just said, you're not hearing well. You haven't been hearing well for a while, and I really want you to go to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. So scheduled an appointment thinking that they were going to clean my ears or I had water in them or extra wax. And I was diagnosed at that appointment with otosclerosis, which is progressive deafness. And I would need to have surgery on my stapes bone, which is the smallest bone in the human body. While I was at that appointment, it had nothing to do with anything else, but he said, I'm an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Let me give you a full check. And he discovered a lump in my throat. We had it biopsied and discovered that I also had thyroid cancer. So we scheduled my appointment to have a full thyroidectomy. And the night before my surgery, my husband came home and said, "You're pregnant." And not many men get to announce to their wives that they're pregnant. But my husband told me that I was, and said, I really want you to take this test.
How did he know before you knew?
Well, so he said, "You've been getting up and going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. This is what you did with our son, Jack. This is what you did with the child that we miscarried." I mean, call it men's intuition or God gave him a sign, but I did. I took a test, and I did what any woman would never do, and I abandoned the results. I thought, there's no way that I'm pregnant. This is the 1 month that's a hard no. And I tucked my son in, took a long time, came back downstairs, and sure enough, we were pregnant. So very excited at first because, again, we had a miscarriage just a month before, and I was thrilled. And then I realized I'm having surgery tomorrow. So we got on the phone with my anesthesiologist and my surgeon, who assured me that they could adjust anesthesia to make sure that myself and baby were in fact safe. We went in for surgery, and Kyle, my surgeon, and his nurses laid hands on me and prayed over me before they wheeled me back into surgery.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It was incredible. And I woke up from a successful thyroidectomy where my doctor told me that, your thyroid is gone. However, your cancer has spread. And that's when we were given two choices. We could either abort our child and really focus on my health, or we could wait and potentially risk me dying. I would be the end game. That would be the worst scenario. But my husband and I are both fearlessly pro-life, and we knew that child had a purpose, and it wasn't my choice to make. God already made that choice, that her life was valuable when he knit her together in my womb. So We delivered Presley full term, and I breastfed her for 2 months because when you have breast milk in your body, the radiation actually attacks that and not the cancer. So, but I really wanted to give her breast milk because I knew that that was best. So I breastfed her for 2 months and then kind of went through a process of ridding the breast milk of your body, which is kind of a painful process that not many people, I think, are aware of. And then I started a low iodine diet, so no salt in my diet for about a month. And then I did radiation, and today I am cancer free.
That is incredible. Well, congratulations and praise God that your life and your child's life were both saved. Maybe you can tell us too, how much of a difficult choice was this? I mean, what were the doctors telling you about your survival rate and the baby's survival rate, or your chances of this getting worse or really truly putting your life at risk? Like, where were you on that scale?
Yeah, so thankfully I had really incredible doctors who also valued life. And so I think they really did push me in the direction of it's thyroid cancer. So thankfully it is not as threatening of a cancer as some others. And also, one of the things that I discovered through all of this is that when you're pregnant, your body really goes into fight or flight mode. So I think truly some of those hormones from myself and from baby during that pregnancy kind of kept the cancer at bay. So it was definitely a hard decision in the sense that it was easy to make the decision. We knew that we were choosing life, and from the get-go we knew, and we were praising God in that moment. However, walking the steps was a little bit more difficult because it was an everyday thing. And every day I would get up and choose to just praise God in the storm.
Wow. This is so important that people hear from you on this because we're living in a culture right now that promotes abortion for convenience, right? And I've done a deep dive into Planned Parenthood, their annual reports, everything they list on their website. They list about 10 reasons to choose abortion over life or adoption or going the other route on their website. And about 9 of those reasons are for convenience. And so it almost makes it so easy nowadays just to say, you know what, this is potentially going to put my life at risk. This is going to be difficult. It could be painful. It could hinder my, radiation or my therapy journey to get healthy and cancer free in the future. You had every opportunity to say, like, this is too hard with those other voices, saying just take care of it. You can get pregnant again once you're healthy. I mean, you had a lot of reasons on the other side that many people would say made good sense, and yet you chose the risky way. And isn't that what it really is? I mean, bringing a life into this world, a million different things can go wrong, and you were facing those. And so I commend you because that takes a lot of courage to, as you said, wake up every day and make the decision to fight for your baby's life. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I was home for that baby until God chose to take her home. And my womb was supposed to be a safe place for her. And my husband and I both believe that a way in which a child is conceived does not determine his or her right to life. Your desire or lack of for that child also does not determine his or her right to life. So we think all life is beautiful. And I was really excited to kind of, again, take that journey with Christ. What was he doing in my life? And he was clearly um, building me and developing me for something more, and to share that journey. I also am so thankful for my hearing loss because had I not been diagnosed with that, I don't know how long it would have been. They took out a baseball-sized lump in my throat, which should have been something that was visible, and it was not because it was sitting so far back on my spine. Um, I actually did have surgery twice on my ears, and it didn't take. The first time, the doctor used a prosthesis that he had never used before. And the second time, he had a med student do my surgery. And so every time you have the surgery, you risk going completely deaf. And so we just thought it wasn't a risk that I was willing to take. I now wear hearing aids. I love them. I'm a strong advocate for hearing aids. And it's interesting. You will hear of so many people who need them and don't get them because of vanity reasons. And I think if you can't see, you get glasses, you get contacts, and yet there's a stigma around hearing aids that I'd love to crush.
That's a really great point, and you're so right. I had a very close friend go through the same thing, nearly completely deaf on one side, and she really struggled with getting hearing aids, but the technology is really remarkable now, and you can be a great example to others too that, this doesn't have to look like you're a 95-year-old in the old folks home with some big device on you. It's just a different day, and two, again, we break down the basics of political issues here. But this is really, I mean, I always say everything's political, but this is such an
Yeah.
interesting conversation already because I do think culturally we're experiencing a time in which we are not accepting of anything that is uncomfortable, anything that goes awry. And we have sort of set this expectation that everything should be perfect or we're completely in control and that we can dictate how life goes. I think it's why abortion and the life issue has become so politicized. And in this last presidential election, we saw it politicized so profoundly, is because people are seeking this sort of nirvana and getting pregnant, again, in their estimation, throw them off track in what they believe should be their path forward. You're such a beautiful example of this because you got thrown off track in a couple ways here. You have deafness, you have a gigantic lump, again, I can't imagine a baseball-sized lump that you couldn't see and you had no idea was there. And again, to your point, beauty out of ashes. God brought you through that. You're healthy. Your kids are healthy. It's just a brilliant story. But then you found a way to share this with a lot of people. And that outlet, that medium for you has really been largely on social media. How did you make that decision to start kind of speaking more publicly about your experience and your issues on life after that all happened?
I would say it was about 5 years ago. The only good that came of COVID was that I discovered this platform. I didn't even know what Instagram was at the time, and I remember COVID happened, and my children were going to school, and they were being told that they needed to wear masks. And I just thought, I'm not doing this. And we kind of boycotted that. I talked about it a little bit on my social media, and I realized there were several people who agreed with me. And then I also shared a story of Valentine's Day during COVID, and my children were told that they could not bring Valentine's Day boxes to school because they could have COVID on them. However, the teachers would provide the boxes and they would provide the stickers because somehow they could guarantee that their homes didn't have COVID and those boxes wouldn't be, infected.
Sure, that makes
And
that makes
so
perfect sense.
it makes perfect sense.
Then
And
and
so I
now.
started talking about it. And I created a character. She's a little bit like Sarah Palin, and I haven't brought her back for a while. I really need to. Her name is Principal Schmidt, and she would talk to the parents about what was going on, and it was wild. And I felt like so many people were resonating with it. And I remember being at my parents' home in Colorado, and I said, "You guys, I have 1,000 followers. I have 5,000 followers. I have 10,000 followers." And over the course of a few days, we were actually living with my parents because we were getting ready to move to Kentucky and we'd already sold our home. I grew massively. And so I truly just hit my knees and I said, God, if this is what you want me to do, you have given me a loud voice and a strong personality. If this is how you want me to use it, I just want you to bring the people. And he did. And my platform grew exponentially. And so I feel like it's my duty to, speak for the people who feel like they can't speak because maybe they'll get fired from a job or, their fear of losing friends and family over all of this.
I think that's still the case in a lot of ways, not necessarily about how we're talking about COVID. That was certainly the catalyst to, I think, a lot of cancellations or attempted canceling of people, suppression online. I'm sure you had pushback when you were starting to speak publicly about that. That was sort of our first baby steps venturing out to talk publicly about something that people were really divided on and felt very passionately about. I can't really remember a time, especially politically, when there were more histrionics than during about that time of 2020 and 2021. Were you getting the hate, and how did you deal with that?
I was getting the hate on full blast, Kyle. I remember talking about how I was going to go to the grocery store and I was going to walk in the opposite direction. Back then there were arrows on the ground and you had to go north to buy your milk and you had to go, south to get your bananas. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to do it all without wearing a mask. And I talked about how I went into the store, I wasn't wearing a mask. I had multiple people come up to me and say, "Oh, I didn't realize we didn't have to wear masks." And I said, "Of course you don't. This isn't a law." And they took off their masks and it was beautiful and it was empowering. But I got a lot of hate for it. I've had a lot of DMs sent to me saying that, I hope your cancer returns. I hope you give it to your children. I hope your children someday grow up to know how evil of a person is and they murder you in your sleep. I've had people who've called my cell phone and told me that they know where I live and give me my address. I have had all the hate. And yet I know that God tells us when we are preaching about his works that we will get that. And he was persecuted first. And so I feel like instead of using it to really dampen me, I used it to propel me forward.
Mhm. That's amazing. I always found it so illogical and ridiculous that people who were very impassioned about advocating for medical safety were wishing medical unsafety and physical medical harm on others they disagreed with. It makes zero sense, but you handled that, it sounds like, with a lot of grace and a lot of strength. And it's great that you're speaking out about this. The life issue today in the United States, as I said, has become such a politicized issue. We really saw it at fever pitch during this last presidential election. And I do believe it's going to be a political issue going forward, although I personally, because of what I do and the commentary and the strategy that I provide, believe the transgender issue has now taken that top spot. And as we go into midterms in 26 and a presidential election in 28, I do think that has sort of eclipsed the life issue, but we're not done with it here. One of those reasons I think that it has calmed just a little bit is because Roe v. Wade was reversed in the Dobbs decision, and now it's a state's issue, which sort of, kind of dismantles everyone's argument or sort of puts it back into your own state's bubble, right? But this is such a complex issue, which feeds the challenge in talking about it. Everyone's going to have a different position on abortion and life. No two people are going to believe exactly precisely the same thing. It's like faith, right? No two people are going to have down to the precise experience or circumstance the exact same belief. So how do you think, knowing so much about this issue, having experienced, you have just been in the trenches truly and making a decision for life when it was so hard, thinking about the issue, knowing the data, how do you think that we move forward as a nation in a federalist society, right? All together, 336 million people on this issue when it is so personal, it is so specific, but it's also nationally political. What do you think?
Yeah, I think ultimately, I know it sounds probably silly to a lot of people who aren't believers, but I mean, we need to hit our knees in prayer because I don't know how this country will become unified other than that. I mean, I am thankful for President Trump and what he is doing, but I feel like we just need an absolute revival of our country. It's scary. I think my husband and I often talk about how back in the day, a Republican could marry a liberal and it would be no harm, no foul. But now I have friends, I have family who are married, and they have different opposing political views, and it has ripped their families apart because it's no longer political. It's every fiber of your morals and your values are wrapped into that. So to me, as far as the pro-abortion, pro-murder, I call it, or pro-life stance, I don't think that's a left and a right view. I think that's a right and a wrong view. And in the Bible, it talks about how in the end times, good will be evil and evil will be good. And we're absolutely living there. And I think I joke about it. I'm like, I wonder if God is sitting up there thinking, I wish I hadn't promised Noah that I would never flood the earth again, because this would be a really good time to do so. But we have just gone off course. And especially with the transgender thing, that's one of the things that really terrifies me. I couldn't have ever predicted that.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, and I want to get to that too. Do you, Mike? I have a lot of questions for you. Do you think that this is one of those issues we will look back on. And this is not an example that, of course, is to the level of destruction, but we look back on sort of an era in our country when a lot of people smoked, right? That was very destructive. A lot of people got cancer from it. It's just a nasty habit. It, ruins the lungs, the heart. People have horrific after effects from smoking. We sort of look back and on maybe the 50s when doctors would smoke or people would smoke in restaurants, or you get on an airplane and everyone was lighting up. And we look back and think, wow, how did we go through that? That was horrible. Or maybe a better example is, let's look at slavery in this country. Now, slavery has been an issue across the world from the beginning of time. But here in America, we have a very distinctive section of time when we had slavery in the South, and it was horrific. And we look back and think, how could we have done that? How could people have advocated for this? Do you think that abortion is similar to those issues that we have sort of groaned through and worked through? Do you think that we'll look back in 50, 100 years and think, I cannot believe that we as a civilized nation, a modern nation, allowed this to happen?
I really, really hope so. But my fear is we haven't yet. And it's always been an issue. I mean, we have always had people on both sides of this. And it's crazy to me that we have people who are fighting for the right to kill an innocent child. And these are the same people who would never touch a dog, a puppy, one of those that kitten that's like straggling in the streets to the Sarah McLachlan music. But for some reason, we don't seem to value children and the innocent life. And I think back in the day, people would say, they would argue that it wasn't life. We know, and the left would agree that it is a life, because they'll say, well, yeah, I get it's a life. It's, it forms at conception, fine. And then they make all these excuses that they're so aware. I mean, you have so many communities who are taking videos celebrating going to Planned Parenthood and killing a child. And we know it's wrong. I mean, Instagram censors videos all the time. Anytime you say the word kill, you have to say the word unalive, otherwise they'll censor you. But it breaks my heart. I think the same thing about COVID. I mean, we were so blind. So many people were so blinded by COVID. And I understand that for the first 2 weeks, everyone was like, what's going on? Yeah, I guess I'll wear a mask. What's happening? And then as we slowly started to take them off, and we, fast forward several years later, and we still have people wearing masks, even though their little Lord Fauci admits that masks don't really work. But it's like a virtue signaling thing. And so is that what this is? Is that what the pro-life movement is? It's for them, they say, oh, it's a virtue signaling.
Do you think those who are really on the fringe of the pro-choice movement really do acknowledge that life begins at conception? This is the argument that I have heard that they are struggling with. And even Charlie Kirk was just out, doing one of his, set up the folding table at the college campus. And a guy came up to the microphone and they had a mind-blowing discussion about when life begins. This person or student was arguing that it's at human consciousness. And Charlie Kirk said, well, so can we take the life of a 6-month-old? And this man responded, yes. Now, you can make the case that he was just sort of in this argumentative moment and he just popped back because he wanted to be right. But that's the concern too, is when you aren't united in when life begins, you can't be united in when it becomes murder, when it's okay to consider it life. I mean, 6 months, now we're in a completely different conversation. From your experience, do you believe that the pro-choice movement believes that a baby in the womb is a life?
Again, I go back and forth. I hate that we call it the pro-choice. The left is so good with their marketing. So let me just pause for a second, because they do the whole Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter, but it's so much bigger than that. Of course, a woman has the right to choose what happens to her body. But with this situation, we're not talking about her body, because if we were talking about hers, the funeral would be for her and not the child that she just killed. Um, I don't know. I would it makes me sick to my stomach because these are people, and when I say these are people, I'm saying the majority of the left thinks that men can be women. So, yeah, I don't think they have much regard for human life. And I do think deep down inside, these are people who follow the science. That's what Dr. Fauci said for so long. We need to follow the science. And if we're going to follow the science, we know that life begins at conception. And yet it's purely demonic. I have no other words for it, Kyle. I can't think of another word to describe what it is to rip a child from a mother's womb. That's supposed to be a safe space. That child is supposed to be the most protected in that home. And yet we are truly ripping them limb from limb. And yet I think if you did these people on the street who put headphones on these people and made them watch what an actual abortion entails, I think the majority of people would change their minds.
I agree with that. Lila Rose and Live Action actually do that. They go out and show these videos. It's tremendously effective. And I did an entire Politically Basic episode on abortion, Planned Parenthood, facts and data straight from them. And a lot of these live action videos, because it's very difficult to stop and understand what an abortion process is, what a DNC is, what a DNX is. And when you do just understand the basics of what that procedure is, it really changes the way you view this thing that people kind of throw out there like so easy, or now with the mifepristone, the abortion pill being handed out like candy. You can go to a drugstore and grab it and use it like a Plan B. That pill starves a baby, a fetus, to death. It's completely inhumane. So I do encourage people to know what you're talking about when you have conversations about this topic, because it's pretty horrific.
Well, and yet Planned Parenthood also doesn't do a good job, or does no education on talking about how it affects the mother. I mean, okay, so you go through with this chemical abortion, let's say, and this is what maybe it feels like. I don't even think they educate you on what it's going to feel like.
Right.
But then they don't talk about after that. And I'm not talking immediately after that. I'm talking about what happens when that child is supposed to be a year old. Don't tell me that that woman isn't going to have a flood of emotions. And I can't tell you what those would be, if it's regret or not, but those emotions will come up. You did kill a child, and it breaks my heart.
When we talk about this, I like to bring up fetal microchimerism. I've talked about it a few times before, because this to me is following the science and understanding what people who are pro-abortion or don't think it through often, miss this component. It's exactly what you're talking about. Fetal microchimerism is this remarkable, miraculous process of what happens when a woman becomes pregnant. And the mother's cells transfer into the baby, but the cells of the baby transfer back to the mother. It's just this incredible process. And those cells from the baby actually imprint on a mother's body, on her organs, on her bones, on her brain, in her blood. And it lasts for 18 years. So when a fetus, when a baby is removed unnaturally, I mean, sometimes it's, of course, you can't account for miscarriage. I do believe there are after effects that are very similar to abortion with miscarriage. When a baby isn't carried to term and is removed or killed in the womb and those pieces are removed, that abruptly ends that process. And there are ramifications, physical, but tremendous emotional ramifications, that a woman then is just left alone without support or education to deal with. So I think you're absolutely right. We're not doing a good job in any way of talking about this or supporting women who do go through that process and what happens to them after. I think it's putting a tremendous burden onto these women. It's very sad. And I want to ask you too, so we have just seen the Planned Parenthood annual report that's just come out. I'd like to talk about this because these are the stats. These are the facts. This data is coming from what Planned Parenthood is providing. Nobody's making this up or guessing. This is what they're saying. And I want to walk through a couple of these for my listeners and also get your take on it. But what it basically says is in 2022, according to U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, on any given day there were over 368. I'm sorry, that's the wrong stats. Hold on, let me go back. Oh, here we go. Because I want to go back to that. That was talking about foster care. We'll get there. Their annual, yeah, perfect. Thank you. So Planned Parenthood just released this annual report, and what it's saying is that annual funding from taxpayers actually increased by $90 million to almost $800 million they're taking in from taxpayers a year. They actually performed more abortions, 402,200 abortions, which, as you know, Kendall, equates to about 1,100 babies a day. So we're post Roe v. Wade being reversed, abortion being sent back as a states' rights issue. And now with Donald Trump back in the White House, this administration talking about putting forward and passing this big, beautiful bill, which includes defunding Planned Parenthood. They make about $2.2 billion a year. So we're talking about 800 million of that coming from taxpayers. They're doing fine. They don't need those taxpayer dollars. They're more than capable of getting funding from private donors and other sources. But those statistics are surprising, I would say. What do you think? What do you think?
Yeah. Shocking statistics, and yet not shocking for anybody who's been following it for quite some time. We know that Planned Parenthood is an absolute beast and it needs to be defunded, as you just said. I don't think my tax dollars should be going towards the slaughtering of innocent life. It's not something that I choose to support. And I don't have much to say on this topic other than that's it. It needs to be defunded. It's disgusting. I'll go back to just the basics that I said of the way in which a child is conceived does not determine his or her right to life. Your desire or lack of for that child does not determine his or her right to life. The number of chromosomes that child has does not determine his or her right to life. We don't get to make those choices. And I can't imagine killing any other species at this rate and it being okay with people. I mean, PETA loses their mind when a dog is treated unfairly, and yet we do it every day. And by we, I mean Planned Parenthood does it every day to innocent babies. Every single minute of every single day, they are killing children.
There's another component to this, and I want to put this in front of you. This was the statistic that the most recent data that we have on our foster care system. So HHS says that on any given day, over 368,000 children are living in the foster care system. Over 108,000 of these children are eligible for adoption. They'll wait on average almost 3 years for an adoptive family. Are we missing this component? Because there's also estimated to be about 2 million couples currently waiting to adopt in the United States. There are so many potential adoptive families. We have all these kids, sitting in the foster system. You can make the argument that system is terribly broken. But to counter the claim that a woman should seek an abortion as opposed to putting a child up for adoption because they won't get adopted, this data really counters that. What do you think?
So it is so what they're saying is that it's better for a child to receive the death penalty than to possibly grow up in you name it, a poor community, a community that doesn't have a loving mother and father. I can't think of any situation where death is better than what we have here on earth. I mean, there are so many examples of children who come from the foster system and who grow up to do incredible things. But for us to be the determining factor of if they get to live or die, why is that our choice to make? That seems so backwards. Nowhere in our Constitution do we have the right to take an innocent life.
Do you think it takes someone going through an experience like you went through to really snap us out of this and understand what's at stake, that a human life is at stake?
I mean, I don't even think we need to take it that far. I feel like any mother who's experienced having a child, she would do anything for that child. I don't think I'm in the small majority to say I would truly throw my body in front of a moving train to save my child who's on the tracks. I think most mothers would say that. And yet, for some reason, they think that the birth canal is this magical place where a child is transformed into a clump of cells and something that's worth living for. But a child isn't worth any less in my womb than it is in my arms.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Well, Kendall, tell us where you're headed with how you're speaking out, with the work that you're doing. What are your goals? Where do you want to see this go? You've grown this tremendous platform and people love you and want to follow you and hear from you. Where are you headed with it?
I really love where I am. I feel like I am pouring into my children. And so, people have said before, are you going to write a book? Are you going to do this? Do you want to do a podcast? I don't have the desire for it. I'm so content right now with where I am. I do love to speak when I can. I've gone to several different, places. I actually was in Kentucky at Frankfurt at our Capitol, and I got to speak on the steps with my daughter Presley, who's the one that I was pregnant with while I was diagnosed with cancer. And I got to have her on the stage with me at the March for Life. And it was a beautiful moment. And I will continue to fight for life in that aspect. I was raised in a Christian household where my mom served with the Reagan administration, and life inside the womb was so massively important to her. So I feel like right where I am, sharing this news daily and speaking I'm really getting so much joy of it. And again, I feel like God gave me this testimony that could have really just crushed me, but I'm using it to hopefully better his kingdom and help other women.
I love your throwing your body in the car videos you do. You just kind of like pop in your car while you're like shouting at your husband or somebody. Are you filming? Yeah.
Yeah,
Are you in it?
that's
Good.
the other thing I feel like about my platform. I like to show up every day and be authentic. So I am a little bit different from some influencers where a lot of our political influencers share the stories, share the news of the day, but I like to share every aspect of my life. I mean, I share, our Bible studies that we do, and I share all the messy stuff too. I mean, we are right now in the middle of our third um water damage situation with our home in the last 4 years, and I'm sharing that with people, and so many people resonate with it and they love the authenticity, and we get to talk about it and share it. So it's not just politics on my page. It's fashion, it's Jesus, it's being a mama, it's all the fun things.
All very political things, by the way. Everything's
Yes,
political. That's what I
everything.
always say. Name something, and Kyle Campbell will find a way to make it political. Well,
I agree.
um, and I do hope things have sorted. I have been following you in your water damage. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
But let me ask you, a couple more things. I know we've got to wrap up our time soon, but being an influencer on social media, it's kind of like, buckling in for a wild ride on a roller coaster these days. When, Trump won the presidency, we saw a flood of people from these media companies and these tech companies and social media companies get themselves to the White House about as fast as anybody possibly could on that big old fat carbon emitting private jet, giving millions of dollars to his inaugural fund and saying, hey, you know what, we're going to change our ways and we're going to stop censoring, especially, we all know who gets censored on social media. It's people who are talking about anything that is considered political on one side of the aisle, mostly. With your experience and sort of growing this big following and people wanting to hear your true, honest, genuine, authentic thoughts, and I think that's absolutely what people are craving right now after getting so much manufactured content
Yeah.
from corporate media recently. Have you seen any changes from those pledges to, remove some of the suppression or some of the censorship? Do you see it changing yet?
Absolutely not.
I was like, what?
Not in the least.
Okay.
There are no changes that have happened. I was growing at such a quick rate, thousands of followers a day. I'll get lucky if I grow 1,000 in a week. And yet it's interesting. I have a lot of views, and my statistics on Instagram will say that I've reached 10, 12 million accounts in the last 30 days, and I'm thinking, but every time I grow, they take away. So there's in your back office on Instagram, you can see, how many new followers do you have? And for some reason, if I've grown 8,000 in 1 month, they've taken, 5,000 away from me. And I just think that's odd. I personally am not someone to like rage unfollow people. I think usually people are following, but it's not like it's not like I wasn't controversial and now that I am, people are unfollowing me. I've been saying the most controversial stuff the whole time. And so it's odd when I get just as many unfollows as I do follows for the month. But no, I don't think Zuckerberg kept true on his promises to not say things. I mean, I actually just did a video recently. YouTube allowed a woman who was a mother to put up videos on their platform of her it was live, and people would pay her to mutilate, so to boil alive and to skin alive bunnies and chickens and rabbits and frogs and cook them. But they allowed it because, home economics. They were all titled cooking, a cooking channel. And so they allowed it. And yet they allow those things, and they allow child pornography and human trafficking to happen. And yet, for some reason, they always seem to be able to take down the MAGA supporter content. Yeah. Always. It never fails that it does not slip through the cracks.
You're not wrong. Sadly, I've been hearing this from everyone, that it's just the same. I think they kind of reconfigure a little bit or change the algorithms or they make changes, and it seems like they're just distracting from the fact that they have promised to make things more free speech aligned, and that is certainly not the case. So,
well, but didn't he say from the beginning? He said, "I'm not doing this." He said, "Oh, I'm not censoring people," and then he says, "Oh, guess what? We're not going to censor people anymore."
Yeah. Yeah, I think that they secretly still want to do what they want to do and promote certain things and squash other things. So, the personal preference is threaded through all of these. Even X, I've got to tell you, this isn't mutually exclusive to people on one side of the aisle or not. So, this is the open call for all of you, social media platform owners to please just allow people to speak toward the more conservative viewpoint, should that be their stance. And, if it's violent, if it's calling for violence, we just saw former FBI Director James Comey just, happen upon some shells. Come on, he put those there. Knew exactly what 8647 meant, and that was popped up, no problem, and some other things that are highly questionable. So I'm with you, and I will hope for better days there, that's for sure.
I do too. I feel like it's my audience's responsibility to decide, do they want to follow me or not? If I'm constantly bringing stuff to them that's a lie, then they can determine, I don't want to follow Kendall in Kentucky anymore. But that should be their choice.
Yeah, absolutely. We're pro-choice when it comes to social media consumption.
Absolutely.
We're pro-choice in a lot of ways.
We are, and I am pro-choice in letting a woman do what she wants to do with her body. I'm just, when it comes to abortion, it's not her body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing. I know that you've got some connection with Make Wellness, with Anthem creators, a little bit with We The Studios. You're so busy. What are you focusing on? What work are you doing right now? And where can people find you doing that work?
So, I mean, Kendall_in_Kentucky is where you're going to reach me most. Right now, yeah, I am really growing my business of Make Wellness. They're bioactive precision peptides. They're derived from nature. So really making the switch of ditching big pharma and going after a nature-derived version that's made in America. So no needles. And yet with products like this, I mean, I was able to get off of my big pharma anxiety and depression medicine. And I've had so many people get off of Adderall and Ritalin because of our products. So I am very interested in helping people ditch big pharma. And I talk about it a lot on my social media too.
Yeah, love that. Hope people go and find you. And I'm repping you today and your Kentucky-ness with my Keeneland tumbler. I love
You've been
Kentucky.
to Keeneland.
I've been to Keeneland. It was one of the best experiences. Actually, my trip to Kentucky, I took my kids and it was very educational. We went out and saw the Ark. We did Keeneland. We traveled all over. That famous cemetery you have. Who's in there? Davy Crockett?
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
You've done all the things.
No, we did all the things, and it's just a beautiful state. I don't think people think about too often, but I strongly encourage people to go to Kentucky, check it out. Lots of political signs out there for your Andy Bashir. What do you think about him?
I think I I think he will likely move into that position. I think our state is pretty red, and I am hoping we continue to go that way. Um, I, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of torn right now. There's not many people who are coming up against him that are big names. So I think it'll be interesting to watch how that plays out. I was going to say, and again, this isn't political. I wanted to go back to the arc. I had a question.
Yeah.
How massive was the arc? I mean, when we talk about like going to see the arc, and this is if anybody's listening and they don't know what we're talking about, it's a recreated Noah's Ark. It's massive.
It's
And
massive.
it's scale.
Fascinating because I just learned so much about, I mean, it took 80 years in the Bible. It said it took 80 years to build this thing. And you can see why, because what's the most fascinating to me is the systems that they employed within the ark to get fresh air, to pump out stale air, to get fresh water in. I mean, think about it. They were, this wasn't necessarily fresh water they're floating on, to feed different animals, to keep them separated. Some of the animals that were on the ark that we don't have any longer. I mean, the whole thing just is mind blowing. And you can really see how it could only have been God breathed and God planned, right? Because
Yeah, I mean,
humans
there's
can't
one
figure
section.
this out.
Yeah, there's one section. I don't know if you guys went in there. You walk through, it's very small, but it's pitch black, and all you can hear are the noises of all of
Yes.
the animals. And you imagine you are on a cruise ship in the middle of the night. There's no electricity, and all of these animals. How terrifying is that? And I've seen these videos on Instagram of if Noah had an iPhone, how beautiful it would be to see like him showing the lions and the elephants. I mean, wow.
Yeah, really, make that suggestion for people to get out there. It's a little bit of a drive, but they have a great space with other interactive things there. It was just so cool. I'm glad they did that, to really bring it to life and just see how remarkable that was. And then, those were the people we've all derived from those few people who survived. It's just pretty wild to think about.
Yeah.
Well, all right, girl, final question for you. You have been through a lot. You've experienced a lot of things that a lot of people don't. So from your unique perspective, give us your final thoughts and advice on where just decent, good, truthful human beings should be focusing their time and energy this year.
I think focus it on your family, focus it inward. And I don't mean that as a selfish viewpoint, because I think that's another difference between liberals and conservatives is it's so self-centered. Whereas with ours, I really think we are called to focus on God first and then our neighbor. But I think focusing on the family, because again, as you and I talked about with this whole pro-life movement and the transgender thing and everything that's going on in our schools, it really starts at home. And so I think focus there, and I'll leave with my favorite Bible verse that I'm dealing with at this current time, which is consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you are faced with trials of many kinds, because the developing of your faith develops perseverance. I'm sorry, the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work so that you are mature and complete, lacking nothing. And I just talked about this on my social media recently, how it doesn't say that, oh, trust that God's going to hold your hand through this valley, which he will. He'll walk with you through this fire, but we are to consider it pure joy when we have these trials. And I think that's so beautiful to just picture yourself hitting your knees and raising your hands and praising God for whatever trial that you're in at this moment, because he's going to bring you through something absolutely massive. And that's what I think he's doing with our country right now.
Yeah. Love that. Everyone's going through some trial, one or another, and if we all stay focused on that, finding the blessings and staying dependent on God, I think that we would be a lot better off if everyone put their focus there. So I'm so grateful for you, for the work that you're doing, that God has brought you through this so powerfully. So keep on speaking out in the wonderful and unique way that you do. And I do really appreciate your time today. Kendall, I hope that you'll come back on the show again in the future and join me once again.
Thanks, Kyle. And if you come back to Kentucky, you'll have to stay with us.
I cannot wait to get back to Kentucky. I'm there, so I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic, where we break down the basics of all political issues and let you decide. Be sure to follow us at politicallybasic.com and at Politically Basic on all socials so you don't miss a single episode. We'll see you next time.